Welcome back. My name is Vern, and today we will be talking about stopping child abuse and understanding the victims, what the victims are going through. And I did a little bit of research. I should turn this down. I did a little bit of research on what a victim goes through. Over the last few days, we've been talking about a victim, and the victim's been crying out. And sometimes if we can understand the victim more, it helps us to really look at the perpetrator and focus in on the perpetrators. In this case, the perpetrators are supported and harbored and bred by the governing body. And what do I mean by that? Well, the governing body allows over 8.7 million people to have this situation where they can hide pedophiles within the congregation. And it's based on this two-witness rule we all know. And a child can never have two witnesses. It just doesn't work that way. So we're going to look at the damage that these victims put upon the child. And then we're going to look at the victim, at the perpetrator as the watchtower, because the watchtower has really bred and housed this situation. Now, in this particular situation, it sounds like one of the former governing body members had knowledge of a perpetrator, and this lady's father. So we have no reason not to believe the victims that are screaming out. What I learned in the research is we really want to be supporting them and listening to them and giving them our love. So we're going to look at a few points of what a victim goes through. During sexual assault, a victim's sympathetic nervous system releases stress hormones throughout the brain, preparing for a fight or flight mode, and leaving the whole body is in survival mode until it's pulled out of it. And this victim is in this fight or flight mode, and we can see that by the videos. What are the long-term consequences of CSA? Some research estimates an increased risk of over 1,000%, for ailments and different things, 1,000%. So it's not good. So the watchtower, they have, and the 9 governing body members, let's really look at who's controlling the watchtower. They have made a system out there now that these victims are suffering from major health problems. And I was reading one from Australia where the lady's 70 years old and she's still waiting for an apology from the watchtower, and the watchtower won't apologize. And that's the worst thing, waiting for an apology or waiting for the law to do something. And that's where we talk about us doing something, getting out there as activists and getting do not call stickers on everyone's doors, at least giving them the option to not have pedophiles in neighborhoods, because that's how they rehabilitate pedophiles in the congregation. They get them out in the field ministry, and it's just a breeding ground for more of it. Now, how does early childhood trauma affect the brain? Well, trauma-induced changes of the brain can result in varying degrees of cognitive impairment and emotional dysregulation that can lead to a host of problems, including difficulty on focusing, learning, low self-esteem, impaired social skills, sleep disturbances. And then we might wonder, how does neglect and abuse affect the developing brain, of a small child developing? Well, science shows that early exposure to maltreatment or child abuse can disrupt healthy development and have lifelong consequences. And when the adult responses to children are unreliable, inappropriate, or simply absent, developing brain circuits can be disrupted, affecting how children learn, solve problems, and relate to others. So if you could imagine the victims in the household and the father abusing the victims night after night, and the children are told to shut up and protect Jehovah's name. And that's what the elders, they have elders meetings and they tell them people to shut up, to be quiet, and then basically they tape up their mouths. No one can speak because you don't want to bring reproach upon the watchtower. Well, they say Jehovah, but Jehovah is not God's name. We all know that. Jehovah is the watchtower's name for God. And JW org, the watchtower, it all boils down to those 9 men who claim to be God's messenger. So when I look at this, if in fact Jehovah's real and the 9 members are God's messenger, Jehovah's messengers, Jehovah's an evil God. Jehovah's a very evil God. Because why would the God of the universe, who they claim, Jehovah, which we know that's not true, but let's just go along with their facade, their fictional story. The God of the universe is responsible for all of this child abuse within all of these religions, especially the Watchtower. It's covering it up. It's not apologizing, not admitting it. The Catholic Church is disgusting. All the churches have it. It's all over. And now we're at a time where our collective consciousness says it's wrong. We don't need a Bible to tell us this is wrong. We don't need a Bible to make excuses. Throw away those man-made Bibles. They're all man-made. They're all printed by men. They're all changed by men, so men can rule people, like the Watchtower rules 8.7 million people. That has to end, folks. So this is what's happening within all of the religions, and we're talking about the Watchtower today. Science shows us that early exposure to maltreatment or neglect will disrupt the healthy upbringing of a child. And it may impact how a person relates to themselves, to other people, to the world. The betrayal of trust present in childhood sex abuse is a relational trauma and often impacts relationships in adulthoods. So these people, these victims, can't even have a normal life. They can't even enjoy a normal life. And that has to stop. That has to stop. If you can imagine these victims in the flight or fright mode, their brain, they're inside how they're feeling. No one's listening. And then to all of us that are listening, are we listening? Or are we judging? So the victim is looking for us to love and support them. And that's what we do. Now, can CSA cause psychosis? The association between childhood sexual abuse and psychosis was large and may be casual. These results have important implications for the nature and the psychosis for its treatment, for prevention. And can you get PTSD from CSA? Well, the symptoms of complex PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress syndrome, that's what soldiers get coming back from war. And then the government pays for a lot of therapy. You see, the Watchtower is not paying for any therapy. That's the problem, folks. The Watchtower, the Vatican, they have to empty their purses. And there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of victims. And there's a lot of treatment to get these victims even part ways to enjoy a normal life. They'll probably never enjoy a normal life, some of the victims. Now, research shows that the hippocampus is smaller and less active in people who've experienced this trauma, which can create issues around memory and problem solving. And from an onlooker, that's why we might look and think, well, they don't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Yeah, because they're experiencing PTSD. It's a very complex problem. For those of us that don't have it, we may not be able to understand it completely. This can make it hard for you to distinguish between the past, the present, for the victim, between the past and the present, keeping the victim in a constant state of hypervigilance or strong emotional reactivity. And that's what we've been seeing. Now, the prefrontal cortex, due to its protracted development, the prefrontal cortex is the brain region that is most susceptible to damage in childhood and adolescence, and is hence considered an important target for abnormal development in children and adults who have been exposed to this kind of this child sex abuse. It doesn't go away. Now, why do CSA victims wet the bed? Some survivors of child sex abuse may experience physical effects in the body due to stress. This includes bedwetting, urinary tract infections, stomach aches, headaches, nausea, fatigue, dizziness, and vomiting. And for adults, the physical body keeps an imprint of the trauma once it's endured. So our bodies actually hold the imprint, and we're going to talk about that. Can CSA cause schizophrenia? Well, the adverse effects of CSA can be long-lasting. CSA victims are therefore more likely to be vulnerable to particular kinds of stress in all possible ways, which can precipitate the relapse of any psychiatric illness, including psychotic illness or schizophrenia. Now, I read a study a while ago that Jehovah's Witnesses are up to 5 times more likely to develop schizophrenia than a non-Jehovah's Witness. Now, how long does it take the brain to recover from emotional abuse? There's no timeline on recovery. Even every journey is different. It could take the victim 2 months, 2 years, or 20 years, or even longer to recover. And a lot of it depends on the victim's ability to communicate, the victim's ability to receive an apology from the other side. That is huge for recovery. How do you heal your brain after abuse? Well, they talk about the top down by talking and reconnecting with others. So the first step is for the victim to express what happened or how they feel or what they're dealing with. And what do? We listen with love and with empathy. And if we want to be critical, we be critical toward the perpetrators, the Watchtower, the 9 men that build a society that harbors pedophiles with their 2-witness rule. They built a large organization that is a breeding ground. In fact, the perpetrators have to go out in the ministry to repent with elders, amongst other children. You see, the Watchtower has no idea what they're dealing with, and they believe that they're doing God's will. That's what they believe, or at least that's what they tell us. So what are the 4 long-term effects of emotional abuse? Emotional and psychological abuse can have a severe short and long-term effects. And this type of abuse can affect both your physical and your mental health. You may experience feelings of confusion, anxiety, shame, guilt, frequent crying, overcompliance, and powerlessness. Now, where is the childhood trauma stored in the body? All these traumas get stored within our body. Well, the energy of the trauma is stored in our body tissues, primarily muscles and facial tissues, until it can be released. This stored trauma typically leads to pain and progressively erodes the body's health. Emotions are the vehicles the body relies on to find balance after trauma. So that's why it's so important on this side that we give the victims really good emotions, loving emotions. We side with them, we listen, and we don't judge. How do you release trauma trapped in the body? By using techniques to work through your emotions, like therapy, intentional movement, shadow work. And you can learn to move on from past traumas and release the associated body tensions. So there is methods, but this requires therapy, which costs money, and the Watchtower is not admitting to it, so there is no money coming in. And it's taking millions of dollars of lawsuits to bring the Watchtower down to justice. And I ask again, is this Jehovah's will? If Jesus was on earth today, what would he do? I ask that question to the Watchtower, because I believe Jesus would go into the Watchtower and turn over the money tables and take a whip and whip those 9 men the hell out of there into jail. I believe that's what Jesus would do. And I believe that if Jesus is invisible right now, ruling in heaven, that he would be sending his Holy Spirit down to the governments to help lock these abusers up and help shut all of this religious corruption down in the world. And it's happening, folks. It's happening right now. And it's up to you and I on the other side to raise our voices. And that's what we're going to do at Be Free 2023 here, October 31st. We're going to meet at the White House. And we're going to raise our voices, and we're going to talk about this to the governments, because we need action. The victims need to be heard. And the governments need to hear us. And that's what we're doing in Canada. We have a petition here in the descriptions below the video. And you can click on there if you're in Canadian and help us to shut this religion down as a charity. It doesn't deserve to be a charity. We're giving out millions of dollars to these charitable organizations that do not help people, but they create victims. And they fill up our hospitals and our psychiatric wards with all of the people coming out that have been abused by this destructive, demonistic religion. The governing body is not doing God's will. And by the way, God is not Jehovah. Jehovah equals Watchtower. Jehovah equals JW.org. They invented the name. We all know that on this side of the fence. God is Elohim. God. Jesus God is. Jesus never ever said the word Jehovah. They're two different gods. So releasing this tension in our bodies is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take some therapy. It's going to cost some money. And this is where the Watchtower has to pay. Now, where is the grief stored in the body? Grief can be stored in various parts of the body, such as the heart. Now, I've been shunned for a long time. I've had a heart attack since then. And we store this grief in the heart. I want to see my kids, but I can't. It causes grief. And especially when I know they're being brainwashed by these demonic men at the Watchtower. It causes grief. We can store grief in our lungs. Maybe you have maybe you're coughing. I find I cough a lot. It could be the smoke. The throat and the stomach. The stomach is a big one. We carry a lot of grief in our stomach. People may also experience physical sensations like heaviness, the chest, or tightness in the throat when they're experiencing grief. It's destructive. So, what do I say in conclusion? Well, let us do our part in listening to the victims, siding with the victims, giving the victims a warm hug if we can, metaphorically. They have to feel that someone's listening. We're listening. And we love them. And we're going to protest and support them. We're going to help to bring the Watchtower to justice, one brick at a time. Well, that's about all I have to say, folks. And like I always say, keep living our lives with love. And that builds up a resilience towards the grief. It introduces other things into our life. Maybe we get a pet, a dog, a cat, and that's a way of getting some love back. We give the love out and we get the love back. So important. See you next time. Bye for now.